Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Ready to unpack today's EQAI Morning Briefing. We've got a lot to cover, from soaring stocks to, well, maybe not so soaring stocks.
Yeah, it's interesting to see what's clicking with the market and what's causing investors to hit the brakes. Should be a good one.
First up, Micron. This chip maker is having a seriously impressive day on Wall Street, potentially their best in over a decade. And it sounds like all the buzz around AI is a big reason why.
Absolutely. This isn't just about some fancy new gadget. It really shows how AI is changing the game across industries. And Micron's guidance, it's strong. Like, they're sending a message. We're in the AI game for the long haul. It's like they're riding the wave and everyone wants to be on their surfboard. But speaking of the market, not every company is having a Micron Monday, right? Jabil, the manufacturing company, their stock went up, but it came with a catch. They're restructuring, which usually means...
Job cuts, unfortunately.
Exactly. So is Wall Street just cheering while people are losing their jobs? Seems kind of harsh.
Well, hold on. It's not quite as heartless as it sounds. Investors often see these kinds of restructuring moves as, like, a sign of strength. Like the company's willing to make those tough decisions to stay competitive in the long run.
So it's like ripping off a Band-Aid hurts at first, but ultimately it's best for the company's health.
Yeah, you could look at it that way. They're streamlining, cutting costs, all in the name of, hopefully, bigger profits and growth down the line.
Makes sense. Okay, enough about factories, let's talk travel. Southwest Airlines, they're having a moment. Revenue forecasts are looking good, buybacks are back, and they're even giving their business model a makeover. Is this an outlier, or is something bigger going on in the travel industry?
It's definitely worth watching. I mean, on the surface, this could be a sign that travel demand is back in a big way, maybe even to those pre-pandemic levels everyone thought were gone for good. But it's also about strategy. Southwest's revamp could become the model for other airlines to follow.
Interesting. So they're not just riding the wave, they're trying to, like, redefine the surfboard.
Exactly. Okay, ready to switch gears to something a little more puzzling.
Hit me with it.
The U.S. economy. It's growing, which is what we want to hear, right? But then we've also got jobless claims going down, which, again, sounds like a good thing. But is there such a thing as the economy being too good?
Okay, now that is a head scratcher. I mean, should we be celebrating or what?
Right. This is a classic example of how economic signals can be tricky to interpret. Usually a growing economy means more jobs. But if businesses are nervous about the future, they might be hesitant to hire new people too quickly.
So it's like they're cautiously optimistic, putting their toes in the water before jumping in.
Exactly. They're probably keeping an eye on things like inflation and interest rates, those things that can change the game quickly.
Makes sense. Speaking of things to keep an eye on, durable goods, those big purchases businesses make. Looks like orders for those stayed pretty much the same in August. Not a drop, but not a surge either. So is that good news or bad news?
It's kind of like, in this environment, flat is the new up.
Yep.
People were bracing for a drop and it didn't happen, so maybe manufacturing is tougher than it seems.
Holding steady, riding it out. Okay, but enough about factories and heavy machinery. Let's grab a latte and talk Starbucks, right? Seems they're trying to make a comeback, and their new CEO is really focusing on those union negotiations. Who knew labor relations could be such a big deal for a coffee company?
It's huge. Think about it. Happy employees usually means more productivity, less turnover, and that makes for stronger business overall. Investors, they love that kind of stability.
So it's not just about the lattes, it's about the people making them. Interesting. Okay, from coffee to, well, something a little less enjoyable, maybe gas prices. Oil is all over the place again, and it sounds like Saudi Arabia might be changing how much they're producing. What does that mean for those of us who, like to drive places?
It's a good example of how global events hit home, right? If Saudi Arabia pumps more oil, prices at the pump could go down, but it's also a good reminder that those prices, dependent on all sorts of international stuff.
Like a giant complicated game of oil chess, and we're all just along for the ride. Okay, before we get too deep into global politics, this next one caught my eye, TV in 2029. Apparently, TV execs are already stressing about something that's like 5 years away.
Yeah, it sounds weird, right? But it actually shows just how much power sports have, especially when it comes to broadcasting rights. See, the NFL contracts, they're up after the 2028-29 season, so everyone's nervous about what happens next.
So while we're enjoying the games, they're already battling over who gets to show them years from now. Talk about thinking ahead. Speaking of big moves, Floyd Mayweather is selling his Beverly Hills mansion. I guess even boxing legends like to switch things up every now and then.
Well, and a rookie NFL player just bought a place for almost $5 million. It's
Huh.
a whole different world, right?
That's what, like his first paycheck? Crazy.
But it's interesting, right? These real estate stories, they give us a peek into how the other half lives. The world of luxury real estate and how the super rich invest their money.
It's like its own little market, totally different rules.
Mm-hmm.
And while we're talking about things that are hot, hot, hot esports,
Yeah.
$60 million in prize money for one tournament. Is this for real?
It's huge. Esports are blowing up, and it's not just about the games, it's a whole industry now. Big investments, new celebrities. It's changing how we think about competition.
It's like watching a brand new sport being invented right in front of us. But back to the more traditional market for a sec.
Mhm.
It seems like investors are a little nervous right now. It's like everyone's waiting to see what the Federal Reserve does next.
Makes sense. They're the ones calling the shots,
Yep.
right? What they decide on interest rates and all that, it affects everything. No wonder investors are a little jumpy.
So it's a waiting game. Speaking of games, remember Micron, their stock is still climbing.
They really surprised everyone with those numbers. It just shows if you can exceed expectations, people will notice. And in a market like this, that's huge.
Yeah, they're like the comeback kid everyone rooted for. But not every story has a happy ending, right? CarMax, the used car giant, their stock took a hit even though their sales weren't bad. What's going on there?
It might be a sign of bigger problems, actually. See, even though they're selling cars, it makes you wonder about loans. Can people afford car payments? Are interest rates making it too expensive?
So CarMax might be a canary in the coal mine for the whole auto industry.
It's definitely something to keep an eye on. If people are cutting back on big purchases like cars, it could mean they're worried about the economy.
Yeah, it's like one little change in one part of the market can have this like domino effect on everything else. It's wild. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today when we talked about AI and esports and everything in between. What are your big takeaways from today?
I think what gets me is how all these stories, even the ones that seem totally random, they all connect back to the bigger picture. Like we talked about unions at Starbucks and oil production in Saudi Arabia, but those things actually impact all of us, right? Our coffee, our gas prices, it's all connected.
It's like we've been putting together this giant puzzle all episode, and now we're starting to see the full picture.
Exactly. And the more pieces we can put together, the better we understand what's going on in the market. And that means we can make smarter decisions, as investors, as consumers, even just as people trying to make sense of the world around us.
That's a great point. Knowledge is power, right? So to everyone listening, keep asking those smart questions, keep learning, and keep exploring.
Absolutely.
And that's a wrap on our deep dive into today's EQAI Morning Briefing. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into the world of finance.